we get a lot of flack from people that say, why are you letting why are you letting sick people help sick people? And it's the number one thing that we get a lot often is
Mm-hmm.
the blind leading the blind, basically.
Mm-hmm.
um because they know, because if they didn't talk to another person that knew what it would be like, they wouldn't talk to anybody. And
Right.
I
Yep.
out of all the people I've talked to, out of all the, and I'm not, doctors and therapists and professionals are important, but of all the people that I personally talked to, my own internal experience, I never felt more at home and more trustworthy of other people than when I was talking to a bunch of drunks,
Yeah.
because they just knew.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Everything's Okay, a mental health podcast brought to you by the one and only Crazy Ant Media. Today, we are going to be diving into the topic of struggle, something that we deal with on an everyday basis, whether that be with ourselves, whether that be with our loved ones, or just all of these different experiences that we may encounter in our day-to-day lives. We're super excited today because we have the one and only Dave Frank on the show.
Yes.
He is a social media personality and is involved with the White Flag app that I have been constantly talking about. So I'm super excited to have you on today, brother.
I'm really happy to be here. It sounds kind of morbid, but I'm like, I love to talk about struggle.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Sometimes it's important. Yeah.
It
Oh
absolutely
man,
is.
it's so important. And I felt like, me and Dustin have been talking about this recently, how this podcast has basically become therapy sessions for us because we actually get an avenue to talk about all this shit and just throw it out there. And it's been so relieving to us. So I guess I'll start off with, because I've been struggling a little bit recently with feeling like all of my stuff goes to the back burner. Right now, Dave, I don't know if you know, my fiance just started her first year in teaching. She is a first grade elementary school teacher. And she is also a very anxious person. So it's a lot of like the attention has been put on her, and rightfully so. She has a lot going on. She has a lot to adapt to. But I feel like right now I am at a lonely point where I feel like she's so concentrated on that, which she should be, but I feel like it's not my place to bring up my stuff just because I don't want to distract her from everything else she has going on. And then being in a new environment, staying with, people who I know and love, but it's still developing those relationships. So that's been very interesting, but it's definitely been, trying these past couple weeks just because I'm trying to find my rhythm. I'm trying to find my groove. And I've just been struggling with, a sense of home, a sense of like just comfort, I guess. I feel like I'm always uneasy and just anxious about a lot of things for no reason. So that's kind of what I've been dealing with this past couple weeks and just trying to adapt and trying to figure out my path and where I am right now in my life. So it's been very interesting.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's tough. A lot of times that, we want to make sure that the people in our lives are happy.
Right.
That's something I struggle with, this exact scenario frequently. We've got
Mhm.
two kids in the house. My wife and I both work from home now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And when everyone is together all the time,
Mhm.
there's always this voice that says, pick your battles, pick your battles. And you want to make sure you do that. Because not only because we think it's healthy, but we also don't want to feel guilty, like you said, that we're bringing up something that we shouldn't bring up. I heard
Right.
somebody once tell me, they said, I'd rather be guilty than resentful, meaning I'd
Mm.
rather bring it up and feel kind of like maybe I was in the wrong and should have picked my battles better than
Mhm.
not mention it at all. And then, it's going to come out anyway. So that's a lot easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
But I've been trying to, tackle that same problem.
You know,
Just
that's a great point, though. Like, I love that you brought up resentful because I feel like that is the danger. If you set your own stuff on the back burner and you focus only on other people's happiness, and you continue to do that over and over again because you think it's the right thing to do, you do grow resentful. And down the line, that's going to be more harmful than if you had just said what you were thinking and put it out there, right? Might be a momentary argument. It might be a momentary struggle that you got to get past. But it's going to be a whole lot easier than when that resentment comes up years down the line going, hey, my life is not what I thought it was going to be, and I resent you for not letting it be what I thought it was going to be. That's a whole different struggle that could be much worse. So I like that you brought that up because I feel like a lot of people do that. I feel like, the marriage rate in this country is god awful, right? And I feel like because of those type things, we get 10, 15 years down the line and you're resentful that you didn't live the life that you wanted to because you were focused too much on the other person or not enough on yourself. So I think it's extremely important to put your struggles forward and say, hey, I'm having a bit of an issue with this. Let's talk about it. Even if it causes some conflict initially, I think that's the right thing to do because like you said, going down the line, it can get much worse if you don't.
And resentment's like bacteria. Like it doesn't take a whole lot to grow.
That's right.
And I think a big mistake people make is they assume that resentment only comes from other resentment. So if I feel like I'm being undermined in the house all the time, to me that's like, oh, I don't want to be resentful of that, so I'll address that. But if I feel like maybe I had to quit my job and be a stay-at-home dad and my wife got a promotion at work, in my mind I'm thinking I'm really happy for her, that's really cool. And then there's 0.03% of me that thinks I wish I had something to do. That's not in any way associated with her or what she's, that has nothing to do with the situation, but that's all that little resentment needs to build and say, exactly, I'm not doing something because of her, right? Which you wouldn't logically feel that way. But we have to watch out for those little warning signs of what could end up being that illogical thinking. And I think that's what gets us all out of times is just not watching out for it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's been very interesting too, because from relocating from where we previously were to where we are now, I always felt we kind of role reversed, basically where she felt like she was just trying to figure out her professional career, what she wanted to do and different things like that. But then now with her finding her professional career and in my line of work where the strikes at the time of this recording have everything shut down. So I'm kind of in a standstill trying to figure out what to do. It's kind of been like a role reversal type of thing to where I just need to continuing supporting. That is very important, but I also need to continue keeping my mental health in the right state of mind and continue, doing what I can on this quote unquote off time. Just because, a lot of things are halted in the entertainment industry doesn't mean there's things we can't accomplish while it is, like us writing our television series or like us coming up with new ideas to bring forth to the table. So it's been very interesting. And then a little struggle with trying to figure out what we want our interns to do besides post on social media, because we want to use this as like a growing opportunity for them to like get their feet wet in the entertainment industry, but then feeling bad because right now it's a good example of, sometimes it's slow and sometimes you just have to adapt with what's going on. So it's definitely been a struggle trying to navigate this industry. That's for sure.
Well, and for me, just sitting back, my struggle is because for anybody listening out there that's not familiar, his fiance is my daughter. So it's that situation where like, I'm trying to balance, like, of course, as a parent, you want to guide your child. You want to make sure your child is okay. You want to make sure everything's all right. If she's anxious and having a bad day, you want to be there, kind of a thing. But then I'm struggling with not doing that, letting her hit the bumps and bruises and get through them and letting her know that everything is going to be okay and she's got to figure that out. And then also being concerned about Logan and saying, hey, I'm not just concerned about Emily. How are you doing? Because I know Emily's probably dropping all this on you. How are you doing and dealing with it all? And beyond just figuring out how to balance the two of them and making sure they're both okay without overstepping on one or the other is I'm not there yet. So I haven't relocated yet because I'm still closing things down here. So not being able to be there is my biggest struggle right now. Like, I just got back from a visit down there and it was horrible coming back here. It's like, okay, I'm ready to be there. I know I still have stuff to do, but I'm ready to be there. And I feel like maybe it could be a little bit easier, like with Emily doing her thing now and being away and at her job and everything, and with us in strike. At least me being there, Logan and I could like be together and be like, okay, let's work on this. Let's focus on this. Sometimes being separated like we are right now, it's not that easy to do. So it's struggling of like, I wish I could be there so that we could be taking care of him while Emily is now taking care of herself. And so I don't know, man. It's one of those, what do I do? Do I hop on a plane? I literally joked, I'm going to hop on a plane again this weekend and fly back down there. But I can't do that every single time there's a little bit of a hiccup. So it's, yeah, man, it's just, how do you balance that and not feel bad about one or the other person, right? It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, my kids are very young at the moment, but that's a universal parenting problem.
Oh, for sure.
That it doesn't seem to ever go away. You would think in your mind that the polar opposites of being a helicopter parent and being just totally neglectful, you would think that there is a giant chasm in between those where you're doing okay. And I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
But for us, it feels like this big.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure.
It's we're not doing enough or doing too much.
It's like every second I'm thinking, am I helicoptering right now? Is it, if I leave her alone, am I ignoring her? Am I, not doing my job as a parent? You're right. It's like this big. And to try to stay there is so hard.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Something else I did want to bring up in this episode because the topic is struggle. So there's been a few big celebrities, actors and entertainers in Hollywood and the world that have passed away recently from things that have to deal with mental health. One in particular being Angus Cloud, who was on Euphoria, struggling with mental health all of his life, and presumably overdosed a week after his father died. Now, I know that is definitely a big struggle because sometimes, us being morbid human beings, I think about what would happen when my mom died or my stepdad or Dustin or like all of these things. And I'm just like, man, how it's going to be really hard to try to deal with that and to try. It's a struggle not to think about that, specifically when these big things happen. But I just, mental health is such a big thing that we are still getting used to talking about it more. We're getting used to it being a normal conversation with different apps like White Flag and different podcasts like Everything's Okay. It's becoming more of a regular day thing, but we still have a long way to go to where these people who technically are on a pedestal feel comfortable talking about these things and getting into therapy and having close-knit conversations with friends and cast members and different things like that. So that is something I definitely wanted to bring up because he was just 25, I believe. And I'm 27. So anytime like someone young like that, or close to my age, it definitely hits home, specifically because I've had some suicidal bouts in my time. So with anything like that, it definitely hurts.
There's a gentleman named Kevin Berthia that we work with. A lot of people know him because he stood on the edge of the Golden Gate Bridge and was going to jump, and he was there for over an hour with a police officer that had eventually talked him off. And something he had said one time that really opened my eyes to how we help people that feel in that position is that he had a journey. This is before Google, right? So he had to basically walk from his house and go ask people for directions to the place where he was going to do that.
Wow.
And he said he remembered thinking the whole time, I wish someone would just ask me why I was going so that I could tell them and they could want to stop. Right. That is a layer of communication that does not exist on the same plane that we're trying to operate at in terms of helping people.
Yeah.
There's been tons of people, Twitch had expressed concerns about his mental health. Pretty much every celebrity I know down this path, a majority of them have at least started to explain that there were issues.
Right.
And, everyone said, oh, wow, well, that's good for you for speaking up. I'm so glad that you're willing to, spread awareness. But it's not that top plane that they're operating on, that they're trying to communicate on.
Yeah.
So for us, for White Flag, for myself, for other people in the mental health community, for you guys in this podcast, those people need to be able to feel like they can speak outward. I mean, I'm sober now, but I didn't ever feel like I could communicate my struggles with alcohol, right? That was,
Mm-hmm.
or substances, whatever. That was not a plane that I was communicating on with people. I know someone that tried to take their own life that had somebody one room away from them. So it's not proximity either that's solving the problem, right?
Right.
It's a lack of feeling like they can communicate openly for fear of the multitude of consequences that could follow that, and an abundance of resources. To solve those two problems would definitely be a step in the right direction, because they've been telling us. Everyone said, I wish that they had spoke out. They did a lot, but that medium of communication clearly is not functioning for people. It's
Right.
their comfortability in explaining who they really are. That's going to be a big turning point for folks.
Yeah, and I think that's so crucial in this case, especially that we're talking about, because the death of his father was the tipping point. This is somebody who had been open and honest about his struggles over the years with mental health. And he has been saying, hey, I'm having these issues and I'm struggling. And I think you're right. It's just not at the level where we need it to be. We're at the plane that we need it to be, because even with being open and honest and saying I'm struggling, and people saying, hey, what can we do? How can we help? How can we do that? We were still unable to prevent this tipping point. The death of his father was too much, and everybody knew he was struggling with his own mental health, but it didn't stop him from taking his own life, even though people were aware. And it's maybe had he felt more comfortable talking about it at a different level, maybe had he been like, I'm terrified that something is going to push me over the edge. I'm terrified I won't be able to stop myself. Those type things where we can get to that level of comfort where it says, what happens if, like Logan was just talking about, what happens if? And I feel like that's where everybody's kind of scared to go. What happens if? That's where we need to get them to feel comfortable talking about, because I think everybody's terrified to go there because they don't want to hear the answers. They don't want to deal with the answers themselves within. And I don't know. I think things like White Flag and things like this podcast and that's helping, right? But how do we get it to that next level, even beyond what we're trying to do, where people can have that conversation? That's the question, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's very interesting too, because for I want to say that a good amount of self-doubt when it comes to mental health. I mean, it comes, thanks, Mickey. It comes from self-sabotage. But it's definitely something where you have these people who reach out and say that they are here for you, but the person who is going through the thing, like, they tell themselves in their mind, no, they're not. I'm actually alone. So that is something that I feel like a lot of us struggle with. And I have an addictive personality. So sometimes, like, I feel like I can go on little benders, and to where, like, I notice I'm like, okay, I'm doing this a lot, so I need to slow down. I need to take a break. I need to create that gap to where, like, I'm not coping with something and I'm just enjoying something. So that's definitely something that I feel like a lot of people go through and then turn into, addictive traits. So I feel like that's very important to identify as well, because you don't want them to get so far gone to where that's how they identify themselves, as an addict, an alcoholic, or, it's all about signs. That's why I think this podcast, our first film that Crazy Ant Media did, strictly about mental health and social racism and all of these different things. So I feel like it's very important to start conversations about these things so that we can bridge that gap. We have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and continue moving forward.
Well, Dave, I'm interested too. Your battle that you were speaking of with alcohol and the substance abuse and stuff, was that a coping mechanism? Was it something that you were using to cope with something else that you were going through, or it was one of those things where you were young and you were just drinking, having a good time with the friends party, and it started to lead to that, or how did that happen? What caused that?
So most people describe alcoholism or substance abuse or any kind of addiction at all as a progressive disease.
Mm-hmm.
And that couldn't be more the truth, because that is what it started out as. I started drinking young, for 15, 16. And that was love at first drink. I was like, I like the way this makes me feel. I like the way I act around people. I like the way I dance. Everything about myself I liked, right? I was
Yeah.
like, this is the me that I want to be.
Yep.
And one of the things that a lot of alcoholics say is, I stopped partying a long time ago. That it only took 3 or 4 years of actually enjoying myself before it wasn't anymore. It was just a facet of my life,
Mm-hmm.
that I did used to cope. Yes, I used it to cope with hard times. I also did it when I was bored, or when I was sad, or when I was happy, or when I was celebrating a success or commiserating a failure, when I didn't want to talk to people, when I did want to talk to people. I got to the point where I couldn't live with or without it.
Mm.
Um, and for a lot of folks, when they get to that point, they have taken so much time to figure things out about themselves and the world around them and how things function. They think they've got it all figured out, right? That's why when people say, I'm here with you, the reason that it doesn't penetrate that deep is because those people have already been living in that world for so long.
Right.
It's like when someone goes to a foreign country and the first day they say they're a citizen. It's like, you're not. You're in my world, but you don't know what you're looking at.
Right.
And so when I got into AA, I was a dad prior to getting sober. I think a lot of my followers think the opposite, that I became sober and then became a dad, and I've just been this really cool dad since day one. That was not the case. I remember going into AA for so many reasons, for my kids, for myself, for my wife, but not fully invested in what I was doing. I said it was, there was a portion of me that said, I'm here almost because the jig is up, right? Like,
Right.
I don't have any more cards to throw to keep this lifestyle going, and all the other good reasons. But a big motivator was, what else am I going to do? They're all looking at me,
Yeah.
Um, and when I walked in there, again, I was there because I was just kind of obligated to be there. But it didn't take long to hear people. No one could have guessed what they were saying. No one could have said, I'm going to try to make them believe that I actually am an alcoholic and that I go through the same things as this guy does. No one could have guessed that accurately. That was a shared experience that they all had to some extent. Our stories are unique, but our experiences are far from unique. They're
Right.
very common. And that was a very quick injection of proof to me, that peer support was a major factor in helping people. Every major movement that's ever existed, whether it was for civil rights or for change in our environment, or political change, or awareness for something, or a charity, it always goes with the struggle first, and then there's this long expanse of awareness, right? We feel like
Right.
being aware is enough. And then the very last portion is this tiny sliver of action that starts you in your next chapter. And for a lot of people, for me, it was, yes, I'm an alcoholic. That's great. But it wasn't until I actually took the time to sit down and talk with those people and take those actions to involve myself with people that were like, yeah, you have those things going on, and there are specific things that you can do to help you with that. It doesn't even always have to be advice. I can just sometimes say, this is what I did. And they were like, yeah, that was pretty shitty of you. And then,
Yes.
and they're like, so what do you want to talk about now? And like that feeling of like, I can be honest about those things here, that did not exist anywhere else in the world. Even if I could be honest, the combination of honesty and relatability to other people was really where I thought I could actually get something done here about this.
So,
I don't have to lie, and people don't have to lie that they understand.
Right.
That was a big determining factor.
do you think that it's because you said relatability, people who have been there, people who have gone through it, they're similar to you. So when they say, "Oh, dude, yeah, that was pretty shitty. That was pretty fucked up," right? You can take that, because when it's somebody that isn't going through it or hasn't been through it, you feel judged. Like they're judging you for what you've done, like somehow. Yeah. But when it's somebody that's been there in the trench and knows what you're talking about, you can take that type of a comment and go, yeah, you're right. Right? So it's so critical to be with peers, because you can take that from somebody who's been there with you, who's gone through it, who understands legitimately what you are, instead of, because I feel like a lot of times why people are scared to go to those type groups or reach out to people for help is because the judgment. They feel like they're going to be judged. Oh my gosh, how could you do that? You were a parent and you became an alcoholic. What is wrong with you, kind of a thing, right? And the judgment, the fear of judgment keeps them away. And I feel like we have to do a better job of allowing people to be able to speak their minds and come clean and talk about their problems without the fear of being judged by others.
Yep. That's peer support in general, which is great. That's the reason why I'm so heavily invested in what White Flag does and trying to help it grow, is because I always advocate for AA. I think it's a great program. It's not for everybody. A lot of people get in and feel like it's not as effective as it could be. You need, if I say, okay, I'm struggling with addiction and depression and anxiety, I don't want to go to AA, there needs to be 10 alternatives in peer support.
Right.
And right now they're like, well, there's other 12-step programs and there's support groups on Facebook. You know, that if I want to, and I'm not dogging medication at all, but if I want a medication for literally anything, there's 14 options.
Oh, for sure.
Because we've taken the time to, we're past awareness that medication helps, and we went into the action phase and did a shit ton with it. You know what I mean? If I want to find a spiritual route to go, I've got plenty of options there. There's abundance of options for people that are looking for answers, except for peer support for some reason. And that's partly because people don't know what actual peer support is, even though most of them do it every day in their life. If something horrible happens to Logan, you're right there for him. That's peer support, and people didn't even know it was called that.
Right. Right.
You know, that is the next step for us, is to turn awareness of peer support into something actionable that people have a roadmap for, to know this is what I need to do to talk to people that are like me. Because ultimately for me, I would probably either be alone or not alive if I didn't have peer support, right? One of those two things would have happened for me, but I didn't. I found a route. I don't care what the peer support is. I would always start there if you don't want to start anywhere.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I mean, let's talk about White Flag a little bit. It is an app where you do get peer support. You can do it completely anonymously, or you can, make your username your name, or however you may go about it. But it's definitely something that, like, it popped up on my TikTok page, I believe. And then, like, I went and did some research, downloaded the app, and then just started having 3 or 4 different conversations with people who are kind of going through the same thing, either with it be relocating or feeling lonely, or if they're anxious about something. So that was a very cool experience just to get it right off the bat. And something else that I feel like is amazing is it's 100% free, because you see a lot of these things that say, you're going to get help from this and it's going to be free, but then you go deeper into it and it's like tier list, and if you want to get to a certain point and have these certain conversations, it's $5 a month or whatever. But I love this app because I feel like it is a place to where you can feel like you're with people sitting in a circle and just having a conversation about things, like I said, anonymously. But how did you get involved with White Flag, and how did it speak to you, as a person?
I was so, looking back, it's so funny. They came around at the perfect time. I was making mental health content, parenting content. It all had an element of humor or being motivational in some way. And I felt good about what I was doing. I felt like people were seeing my videos. They were like, I get so excited to see you on my page. It makes it, and that feels good to know that you're brightening people's day somehow.
For sure.
But being a content creator is very lonely. You wouldn't think that would be the case, but it is. It's, entertainment in general can be a very lonely profession, ironically, considering how surrounded by people we are in some aspect all the time. But it's a lonely profession where you get inside of your own head a lot about what people say about you, about what people don't say about you. And for me, there was almost this element. It wasn't even the negative things people were saying about me. It was the fact that I would make a video, and it would be the 14th one I've made that week. And I'm so mentally exhausted from trying to think about what makes other people happy that I don't reply to anyone in the comments. And they're all saying nice things. And I'm like, I'm a jackass because all these people want to talk to me. And
Yeah.
if I replied to every comment that I've ever had, I would be doing it for the next 40 years. It just wouldn't
Right.
happen. So there's a lot of little mental turmoils that go into being a content creator, which are then by the general public often like chastised and made fun of, because they're like, you're an influencer, let's calm down, Nancy. You know what I mean? Like that's the
Yeah.
general
Yeah.
attitude. It's
Yeah.
like, get your first world problems out of here. But you want to do good, especially in the space I'm in with mental health and neurodivergence and helping people. And I felt like I wasn't going anywhere forward to do anything actionable like we were talking about. And I wasn't making any progress on myself to feel like what I was doing was helpful to me as it was to others. And White Flag had reached out and they were like, hey, we like what you do and we have this app. And I'm very picky with my advertisements because I get anxiety about people thinking that I'm a scammer or something. So like I'm really picky
Right.
about the advertisements. So it's like, this seems nice. It's a place where people can go and talk. It's free. That's an easy sell, blah, blah, blah. I was like, sure, I'll do it. And I, did it pretty cheap because they were a startup. And after seeing like the people that were already in the app and the kind of reviews that they had and the things they were saying, this app changed my life. When I saw that there was a direct actionable thing that they were manifesting this thing to give to people. I was like, that for me was a missing link to give purpose to what I was trying to do.
Right.
There's a million things that you can use your platform for. There's people out there today that use their platform to advocate for something every single day, and they still get hate comments that they didn't advocate for this other thing. And I was like, this is one singular thing that I can put all my thought and time into that will feel like it was worth doing. And it has absolutely been that. We've been growing so much. The comment sections, in the videos and stuff are so inspiring to see that they're helping people. And that's what I've been doing ever since then. I even told myself early on, I was like, I just want to make the content after I became in-house. I was like, I just want to make content. I'm not really trying to do anything crazy here. Just, keep me part-time. It didn't stay that way. It couldn't. What we're doing was too important for me to feel like I could do things halfway. So now that's what I do. I wake up in the morning and think about it. And that's what I think about when I go to bed.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
I love that.
No, go ahead, Logan.
I was just going to say, I love that, you feel like you're making a difference, because I feel like as human beings, that's really all we want, right? We want to feel like we're making a difference, or at least if you're a decent human being, where you feel like, because we always say with our podcast, if it can help one person at a time, that's all that matters. Like, it doesn't matter if we get like this huge viral sensation. We don't need to have however many views, but if it helps one person, that's where we're doing something right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, I think bringing it back to the topic of struggle here, I think a lot of times struggle stems from not knowing your purpose, right? I think a lot of people go through life and they don't know what am I here for? What am I supposed to be doing? They are inherently good people and they want to make a difference, and they just don't know how, because they don't know what their purpose is in life. And to find that purpose, and like you were very much describing, when you find it, this is finally the path I'm supposed to be on. This is my purpose in life. This is what makes me do what I want to do for the rest of my life. I think it's so important to remember that everyone has a purpose, and you might not find it right away, but you will. And when you do, you'll know. And it's just getting through those struggles to find that purpose. Because I think struggle, unfortunately, is a part of life, and you can't let it beat you. You've got to get past the struggle, and you've got to understand that your purpose and your path is coming, and hopefully these conversations can help do that. And I think that we just have to pay attention, because I think sometimes too we just blow things off when we notice those warning signs. It's like, oh, such and such was a little anxious today. She's been dealing with a little anxiety. But a little anxiety over a long period of time becomes depression or anxiety disorder. Or, it's taking the time to recognize that didn't seem right today. Let me ask if they're okay. right? Because how many times have you thought, man, she didn't seem so right today, or he didn't, man, he's a little kind of like not like himself today, but you don't ask. You don't ask, like much like you were saying with on his way to the bridge. You think that's kind of weird, but you don't ask. And so when somebody's off, ask. Yeah, I would rather somebody ask me, why are you acting that way today? Why are you being like that? That's not normally you. I would rather have them ask me that in fear that I might get mad at them, but at least they ask me because I might be that guy on my way to the bridge saying, I wish somebody would just ask me why I'm pissed off today. And that could be the difference between jumping and not jumping. And I want to encourage more people to do that. Ask. If somebody is off to you, ask why. Don't worry about if they get mad at you. Ask anyway, because I think it's so critical to helping find out what's going on with people.
Yep. Most peer support is structured on that specifically, like organized peer support.
Right.
Because you are either one or the other. Most people are primarily someone that doesn't want to talk about themselves, but is happy to give advice, or doesn't feel like they have anything to say, or doesn't want to help anyone else, or not motivated enough, but just really need somebody to vent to. Most people fall into one of the two, right?
Yep.
I am an advice giver, and I don't like to talk about myself.
Same.
Yeah, I think,
In peer support, it's very, they always advertise this two-way street. In AA and all 12-step groups, sponsors are required to get a sponsee, and sponsees are required to get a sponsor, because it's part of that give and take relationship that people need to learn and grow from.
Right.
In White Flag, you can raise your flag, yes, or you can answer one, because the sooner that people have practice in driving in the middle of the both lanes and realizing that they can do both instead of just one or the other, they realize the practical benefits that come from that. A lot of people don't know how to ask, or haven't before, or felt weary about it. But asking, I've never heard someone say, I helped someone on White Flag, and then they said, okay, thanks, great, bye. Nobody does that.
Right.
They always say, I really appreciate that. What's going on with you? The minute that you start those conversations in peer sports, 9 times out of 10, you just initiated a two-way street and didn't even know it.
Yep.
And we get a lot of flack from people that say, why are you letting sick people help sick people? And it's the number one thing that we get a lot often is the blind leading the blind, basically.
Right.
Because they know. Because if they didn't talk to another person that knew what it would be like, they wouldn't talk to anybody.
Yep.
Right.
Out of all the people I've talked to, and I'm not, doctors and therapists and professionals are important, but of all the people that I personally talked to, my own internal experience, I never felt more at home and more trustworthy of other people than when I was talking to a bunch of drunks.
Yeah.
Because they just knew. I had to write out everything wrong I've ever done. It's part of the process in AA. It's not required in all peer support, but it's what we do. I had to write out everything wrong that I've ever done in my entire life, from the worst of the worst to the little things that have happened to me, things that I have done to people. And I remember there was one thing that I left off the list. I knew about it. It was the very first thing I thought of when I started the process, and I left it off the list. And at the very end, I was like, that's not right. That's not being honest. So I was like, okay, I'll write it down. And I turned over this like 30-page packet that I had created of negative stuff. And I wrote it really small in the top left-hand corner of the back of the last page. I was like, there we go. See, I did it. And you then have to tell someone about that. Typically your sponsor, you have to go through everything you've ever done, everything that's happened to you. And it's a very like emotionally trying experience.
Oh yeah.
You feel very tired afterwards. And I remember he read the last one on the last page. He said, okay. And he looked at me, he's like, you don't look okay. He took the time to realize that there was something extra happening. He goes, how do you feel? You look like you could feel better. And I was like, I hid one. It's on the back. And he turned it over and he went, blah, 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 blah. Okay, now how do you feel? And I was like, surprisingly better, because he didn't read it and his jaw didn't drop. He didn't say, oh my God, no wonder you put it all the way back there. Right. He just said, okay, yeah, I see why you put it back there, but at least you said it.
Yep. Yep.
And that was it.
Mm.
And that moment to know that I took that little step extra, that it was little physically, but it was a huge step for me mentally and emotionally to let him know that thing. Um, that wouldn't have happened with anyone else.
Mm.
It wouldn't have happened with my family. It wouldn't have happened with my friends. It wouldn't have happened with a professional. It only happened with someone that I knew what it was like.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And that's what we need to offer people. What
Yeah.
we have currently, amazing, amazing resources for when they're needed.
Right.
They all have their own stone in the wall for when they need to be accessed and how they need to be accessed and how often. But there is a giant bottom layer of support that is just not there. And then we wonder
Mhm.
why the wall keeps falling,
Mm.
because peer support does not need to be discovered by people. I should have known what AA was before needing it. I should have known what White Flag was before needing it. Those things just need to exist as commonplace household terms for people. And that is the point in awareness that I feel like we're at, is to
Mm.
push it to the next step and say these things need to be not only talked about, but just readily available and normal. Sure, it's awareness right now. It's so easy to say, we support people in need that feel like they want to take their own lives. We're here for them. We're raising awareness. But if somebody says, I think I'm going to take my own life, everybody freaks out.
Mhm.
They're like, oh my God, get him somewhere. We can't let him do this, because they're not thinking about him or her like that person is.
Right.
They're thinking about them in terms of like they're a flight risk now. That's what's missing in our healthcare support system in general, is people that know what it's like to be each other.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep.
I could listen to you talk about that all day. Like, I
Same.
mean, I'm sure you could tell that both of us were just engulfed what you were saying. I always say to a lot of my friends, because they have also gone through trauma, that trauma recognizes trauma. And those are some of the biggest relationships that I have built in my life overall, because that, you know, someone has been through something similar, so they know that feeling. They know what you have gone through. And I feel like that is so important. That's why I am like best friends with my father-in-law. That's why I am best friends with other people who have gone through some really dark, heavy shit. But then I know that there is light in there, and that you can get not over it, but you can, you know, sustain it, I guess you could say. So it's something that I feel like is very important to come across people who have gone through similar things, because in my opinion, for me, if you haven't gone through something like that, I can't talk to you about it, because you're just not going to understand.
Right.
So
Right.
that it's very difficult, but that, yeah, oof, I could, yeah. What we were just like, oh my God, you
Well,
are speaking so much truth right now.
and the thing that I really, really hope that everybody like really listen to right there is we should know about it before we need it. That is the one thing that you said that really sticks out, because I think that that is so true in so many different aspects of life, not just mental health, but regular physical health. And like, everybody talks about preventative, but you don't go until you need to, right? It's one of those
Right.
things. It's the same mentally with the mental health. We should know about things that can help us before we need them to help us. And the fact that we don't is a problem. And I love that you said that way, because it should be a normal conversation. It should be something that just comes up in conversation, and you shouldn't have to go diving for it when it's too late. And I love that. And yeah, I hope that everybody listening to this like understands that this is how we need to build. This is where we need to lay that foundation, like you said, because it does keep collapsing, and we need a more solid foundation to build it on, so it does not keep collapsing. And you yourself and White Flag, and you guys are strong leaders in laying that foundation and making that happen. And we need more people like you guys to keep doing that.
Well, that's why we appreciate what you guys are doing here. This topic of conversation that we've discussed so far, it's serious,
Mm-hmm.
but this hasn't been like a formal hearing. I felt very comfortable here. It's just a podcast. It's just
Right.
guys
Exactly.
talking about this discussion,
Yep.
That is this medium, this format, this method of conversation about this topic should be like this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where the time's gone. It just kind of passed because we've been chatting
Exactly.
about it.
Yep.
And it's, I appreciate you appreciating preemptive actions because we don't stress it to people because we always tell people download the app before you need it, not because it's like a catchy phrase,
Yeah.
but because people that really need it when they need it aren't going to even have the energy to possibly even open their phone, let
Exactly.
alone
Right.
Exactly.
download the app and then fill out the registration. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because we know what that's like.
Yep.
When it's a form of paralysis. It really is.
It is.
Yeah, and I feel like, specifically for men, some of our biggest shows so far have been when it's a male guest and it's all men talking about this stuff, because there has been times in our society, in our history, to where men feel like they have to bottle it up and just continue moving forward, and then, it just kind of explodes from there. So I feel like the most important thing is to get a group of people, specifically men, on the show to talk about their feelings. So I feel like that is very important. And that's what we did today. So I really appreciate it, man.
This has been great.
Yeah, man. Yeah. It just look, we came on, like Logan said at the top of the show, it started off with struggle, but we went into a whole bunch of different areas. And, it takes a lot of courage to open up about your past and things that you've done that you weren't proud of, or things that you struggled with. That takes a lot of courage. Right. Thank you for sharing your story about your addiction, and because I think that's so important to let people know it's okay. Yeah, this is a safe zone. You are not going to be judged. We've all made mistakes. We've all done things, gone down wrong paths, done things, and you are not going to be judged here. You are going to be like, okay, you're going to come in, we're going to have a conversation, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to relate because we've all fucked up too. And it's okay. That's the whole point of this podcast. It's okay to not be okay, and everything will still be all right afterwards. And sharing that, thank you for sharing that, because like Logan said, I feel like a lot of times there's a stigma on men. You get to, oh my gosh, he's a girly man if he opens up, and man up and be this and that. It's like, it's ridiculous. We're the same as everybody else. We have feelings, we have, and we make mistakes, and we have to deal with them. And the more we can talk about it, the better off we're all going to be.
Especially for failure.
The
stigma like attached from men to failure, which ironically enough is somehow also tied into being a woman, and a lot of those stigmas.
That's
which
exactly
is a whole other can of worms.
Oh yeah, that's a whole new episode.
But that stigma to failure, I see it all the time, and people that are struggling with their mental health, especially addiction. I struggle with it. I remember I was doing great in my sobriety, and I relapsed. Mm-hmm. And I tried to convince myself that I didn't, and I tried to convince my sponsor that it was like, it wasn't really a relapse because I did XYZ, but it was actually XYZ. He's like, okay, if you feel good about it, I do. And I was like, you SOB, you just infected my brain.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, okay, fine, I'll change it internally, but I won't go change it in the little book that we keep all of our sobriety dates in.
Right.
And he was like, if you're going to do it, just change it. And I was like, maybe I could sneak in before the meeting starts, and then they won't notice that, or maybe did I write it in pen? And I ended up telling the group that night about the struggles I was having with it. And they said, one of them said, that's kind of selfish. And I was like, why? And they said, because someone out there needs to know that you relapsed and still recovered.
Yep.
That someone out there thinks that sobriety is impossible, because look at all these perfect people that came in, had all these struggles, and then got it right on the very first try. That person could see you and see that you have a relapse and are doing fine now, and that's what they need to be motivated to be the person they need to be.
Yeah,
right.
If you've relapsed 20 times and you're alive and sober today, that is your personally curated story that other people deserve to know. Mm-hmm. And that goes with anything. I had a conversation with someone that was dealing with self-harm that said, I've done it so many times and I just feel ashamed. I'm like, don't. I don't struggle with self-harm, but I struggle with relapse, and I know how this feels. You're going to talk to someone that's done it one less time than you have, and that's going to be so inspiring to them to know that you're still pushing forward to be the person that you need to be.
Yeah.
Those stories, those failures are literal parts of your crafted story that the universe wants to push out to someone that needs to hear it.
Yep.
So the whole stigma to failure with men is funny to me, because in my mind it's the only thing that makes us who we are.
Exactly.
It's that and our success, which is the only other thing that fills those gaps. So if you're not telling people about your failures, you're not giving them who you are.
That's exactly, and I don't think you're accurately who you are without the failures, because I've always believed, and I know it's true, that in order to succeed, you have to fail. You come out stronger. If you fail
Right.
and can overcome it, then you truly are a success, and you are a stronger success than the person who did just go in and get it right the first time and never relapsed, right? You're stronger because you've had to go through it. You did fail and come out of it on the other side of it. And so, yeah, I've always inherently believed failure is a part of success, and that it's just the way it is. So, yeah.
I love
Was
it. I love it. Oh, go
that
ahead.
AA say that AA puts you with like so many sayings.
Yeah.
They're chock full of them. They have all these corny little sayings that you hate in the beginning, but one of them was you don't start over from square one, you start with experience.
Yes.
Which I really appreciated.
Yep.
Because it's, I talk a lot about addiction, but it's really anything.
Yeah.
These struggles that we all go through, that it's the same principle no matter where you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. But man, thank you so much for your time today. Like, this has been a very enlightening conversation. It's the first of many. I feel like we're going to have a whole bunch of you guys from the White Flag team on, and you are more than welcome to come back on and talk about anything you want to, because I feel like this conversation can keep going an extra
for
5
sure.
hours.
I loved it. I had a ball.
Yeah, man.
Fantastic. Well, what is your social media handle? Because we want people to follow the funny content. I teased it a little bit on our social media, and I think people really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's cool. So my accounts are brave.dave or brave.dave.official. Either one will pop up with my stuff. That's where I do a lot of mental health related comedy, just to provide that comic relief to something that we don't find a lot of anymore.
Right.
And then White Flag is at White Flag app on any socials.
Fantastic, man. Fantastic. Well, listen, take care. Thank you again so much, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you.
Yep.
Bye. Oh my goodness, just another fantastic conversation. And I really meant it when, we talk about enlightening conversation that men have. I feel like that's very important, because you don't see a lot of that. So to have someone of his caliber come on and just get deep with us and talk about his stuff, I feel like was very, very awesome.
Yeah. Men are vulnerable too. And to be able to show that vulnerability and open up, like I said, I think it takes an immense amount of courage. You're a stronger man if you are vulnerable and can open up and share. In my opinion, it does not make you weak. It makes you strong. And I love that we have these conversations, man.
Yeah, it's been freaking fantastic. Thanks again, Dave, for coming on the show. And guys, remember, whatever you're going through, it may be a little difficult. You may be anxious. You may get depressed. A lot of things are happening in the world right now and in your lives, we know. But just remember that everything's going to be okay.